It kind of feels like it hasn't been that long since we've done a Q&A video at a milestone on this channel. The last time, which was only about 3 months ago, we were talking about having 5,000 subscribers and doing a Q&A for that. But not only have we doubled, but we've gone a little bit more than that. But in today's video, I want to talk about 10 things that have helped me grow my channel, but also at the same time answering some of the questions that you guys have at the same time. So if you guys are looking for a fancy B-roll and a tutorial today, not exactly, but it's going to be some key tips if you guys are looking to build your own YouTube channel and to kind of get into this game yourself. Okay, so first question is essentially, what was my first camera? Now, in terms of my first freelance camera, it was a Sony a6000 and a nifty 50 lens. So when I was shooting a bunch of fitness videos and stuff like that, I was getting like 150 bucks per video. That's generally what I would use for 90% of things. And then I just kind of upgraded gradually from there. And I think this is also relative to the question of, does gear matter? And is it gonna matter when you're creating YouTube videos? And to be honest with you, it absolutely does, but there are limitations in certain points where it doesn't. Gear matters when you have the skill set that matches the gear that you're using. So if you don't necessarily have the skill set of video production, I don't recommend buying a $10,000 setup in order to do that. Whether you're shooting vertical video, which is a video that you guys kind of hate. But anyways, the idea is, if you're going to buy a piece of equipment, there has to be a functional reason as to why, and not just because you heard a bunch of your favorite YouTubers talk about it. So gear does matter as long as you have the skill set. And a lot of people push back on gear not mattering, but generally speaking, it's one of two camps really, and it's people that already have access to almost everything, so the diminishing returns of that next lens or that next camera is a lot less, right? So it's easier to say it doesn't matter because you've had the opportunity to try everything already. Or on the flip side, it's people that might not have the access to it, so it's easier to just not talk about it at all, or ask other creators, or kind of advocate for not speaking about that topic because it might be an experience that they might themselves not be able to have. Again, that's just my opinion, but in terms of gear mattering or gear not mattering, I think it's something that's more contextual. If you've gained enough skills that you're outgrowing the system you have, then by all means upgrade and do the necessary research before upgrading. But if you're someone who's still kind of learning, get something that's a little bit low risk just in case you want to opt out and you don't want to participate in filmmaking or videography. But at the same time, like, eventually you're gonna have to pick the gear that's gonna match up with your skill set. But you could always increase your skills, which is kind of what a lot of parts of this channel is all about. So stay tuned for it. Now, second question is going to be, how do I plan my shoots? Now, in terms of my freelance gigs, there's usually a thing called pre-production where you're going through the visual ideas and the visual language and where you want to shoot things, getting talent and stuff like that. That's a whole process on its own for a freelance video. Now, in terms of these YouTube videos, it's a little bit different because I do have a strategy that I use that's actually sectioned off by time of the year, and that helps a lot with the theme of some of the videos that I want to put out. And it's usually based off of just whether or not it's cold outside, to be honest with you. But how I plan these YouTube videos is I have like a weekend, or maybe sometimes I take a week off, and I start thinking of different topics and ideas based on the user, based on the audience that I think I'm capturing with the videos that I already have out. And that's why you see a lot of the videos I do have are relative to each other in some capacity. And then what ends up happening is I schedule days where I plan out like days I'm gonna do a roll. Like today, I'll probably do 2 or 3 videos. And then throughout the week, I'll use the BTS on my freelance gigs. That becomes my B-roll, and then I have my titles, my talking points, and everything comes together in a nicely wrapped video. So that's generally how I plan things. There's gonna be a whole other video on how I actually do this stuff, but generally speaking, those are the steps that I take. Funnily enough, the next question is what my YouTube strategy is. Now, I hope you guys have some time. Sit down, get relaxed, because this might be a long-winded answer. Now, my entire YouTube strategy is based on something I like to call earning your stripes. And that's something I learned when I was playing football, especially at the college level. There was an air of like, you couldn't just walk in and assume that you're gonna be great at everything. And you're gonna have to take time to kind of not be good at stuff. And also you're gonna have to take time to create value amongst your peers and also the respect amongst your peers. Now, the earn your stripes mentality kind of comes into the YouTube side of things because eventually I wanna have my own films on this platform that's irrespective of barriers like film festivals and stuff like that. I just want to be able to post my work and you guys enjoy it. And as well as having things like courses and paid tutorials and meetups and workshops, I have to be able, or at least I want to be able to do all of those things. However, if I started doing that right away, none of you would care. Mostly because I haven't attributed or I haven't given enough value back to the person on the other side of the screen. So what my strategy was all based on is, what are things that people care about and how do I make videos based on my own experience that can give that person value? And that's where it's a little bit easier in the filmmaking niche, at least I find it, because most people like to talk about camera gear. And anybody that says they don't, stop the cap. Technology is interesting. Building camera rigs is interesting. Seeing how other people use the tools to make the art that they want to make is interesting, and it has a place on YouTube. Now, one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to add behind the scenes footage and make it more contextual, because I didn't want to just film a cat because, well, I don't have a cat, but I didn't want to just film miscellaneous things in order to do a camera review. I wanted to bring it on set and bring you guys there with me. So my strategy was based around talking about the tools of video production, but at the same time, objective advice in an easier way that's easy to digest, and trying not to get too big for my britches and talk about things that I might not know about. Now, the second phase of that is learning the tools and then also getting some of the skill set that you might need that's important once you've already bought that camera. And that's kind of that second phase. And a lot of you guys are coming in that in-between where you might see a Sony FX6 video, but you're also learning about multicam interviews. And that's a cool place to be, because you're learning about the tools and you're using it at the same time. The next phase of this now, and again, this is kind of a stepped process, is actually putting out some of those films. We're actually getting a little bit deeper into the skill setting and tutorial stuff. So then that way, there's more credence to what you're saying, because you're not just talking about the gear, you're using it in real life. And you're not just using it in real life, but you're teaching people how to do it as well. Only then, when I feel like I've given enough of that value, will I start putting out my own work, because that's the natural progression of how somebody might watch your videos. Now, the next question is, has anybody recognized me in real life? Yes and no. I mean, yes, in like creative events where there's other content creators that are around, especially in the filmmaking niche, like there's a couple of people that might recognize who I am. It also kind of plays into the fact that I'm one of the few visible minorities in this space, so there's that. But generally speaking, I think one of the tips from this question is just be nice to people. I'm not very good at remembering people's names, or even particularly remembering people's faces. So sometimes when I see somebody in real life and they're like, hey, I'm so-and-so, I DM'd you, you never actually know who's watching your stuff. On more than one occasion, I've been brought on for different jobs because people like knew about a camera that I did have, needed it for a particular job, and have actually like gotten certain connections in production by actually making videos on YouTube. So that's always interesting and really nice. So when people do meet you in person, like, do try to be a little bit more cordial, because you never know, that might be where your next gig comes from. Okay, next question is, how do I use the spec projects or the micro docs that I do shoot in order to pitch different brands to get new work? There's a couple different ways that you could actually do this, and I actually really feel like a lot of these points could be separate videos on their own. But there's 3 ways that I identified in this video where you could actually reach out to companies to get new work. And one of them is just emailing that company directly and being like, hey, we shot this for free, thank you for letting us use the space. If you want us to do more of it, you could always pay us to do it if you think that it's gonna give you value back to your business. The second thing is that you could just reach out to the competing brands in the same industry. So for example, I worked at a boxing gym. There's tons of boxing gyms in Toronto. So I can go to another boxing gym in the city and be like, hey, I made this for so-and-so. Do you think that's something that you can value for your business? Now, that seems pretty straightforward, but honestly, a lot of people sometimes will just make these projects and then they don't really do anything else with them, and they're almost expecting other people to come to them, but you could be a little bit more assertive with your freelancing. And then the third thing is literally what's happening on here, and it's sharing the experience of some of those projects on YouTube, which gives you things like AdSense or affiliate links, or even sometimes sponsorships, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But you can just use it in a variety of different ways, because now that you've made that spec project, it exists forever. Whether your camera breaks down or whether you move locations, you can always use that as a bargaining chip to get new work. And it's just on you guys to be assertive and more aggressive in terms of not necessarily forcing it on somebody, but just letting people know that you exist in general. Now, the next question is, if I had one camera and one lens, what exactly I would pick? And I'm gonna have 2 different answers because I have 2 types of camera. I have one of a hybrid mirrorless camera, then I also have a cinema camera as well. Both completely different functions. However, if money was not an option, I would probably rock with like the Sony A1 and I don't know, like the 35mm G Master lens. The reason why is because 35mm for me is like the perfect focal length in terms of getting the coverage I want to from a general perspective. 50mm is great, but there's sometimes it's a little bit too tight. So 35 is the thing I would pick, and also because it shoots in 8K, I could always just crop in if I need to. Now for the cinema line side of things, if I was to pick any cinema camera in the world, I'm gonna make this within reason, because everybody would pick an Arri Alexa or something. But if I was to pick any Sony camera, money's not an option, I would get the OG Venice and a set of Cooke lenses. because the cook look is amazing. It looks really nice. I want to get a Sony Venice at some point in my career. However, I don't want to purchase it unless I've put out enough work and I've put enough work in to actually earn the right to buy it. So even if I have the money to do so, in my heart, I have to earn the right to buy certain cameras before I do it. And that's either the scale of projects that I'm currently working on, or like what I'm actually gonna use it for. Again, that's earn that stripes mentality. So the Venice, it's not necessarily just having the Venice that I want, but it's more so what comes with the ability to buy it is also probably a lot of success as a filmmaker, whether I continue to do YouTube or want to do this full time, or I'm doing it in the real world, or whatever you want to call it. Now, the next thing is going to be, what is my favorite thing about the YouTube space? Now, this is kind of an interesting one because this YouTube game, this content creating game, is kind of lonely, especially when you have a lot of aspirations to do really well. I would consider myself somebody who has the mentality of like being incredibly uncomfortable to get things that I want. And not everybody, not even my own friends, want to have the same sentiment. So what ends up happening is it does feel a little bit lonely, especially when you want to talk about certain things, and you want people to actually care, realistically. But my favorite thing about the YouTube space, aside from the fact that it kind of frees up my freelancing capabilities, because now that this channel makes like a little bit of money, or it's just enough that like there are certain jobs that like if I don't want to take them, I don't have to. You also get the aspect of being around a community of people that think the same way you do, or have the same intentionalities as you do as a creator, and that's super interesting. And I think only in the last like 3 weeks have I really started to like get that, where other creators have like reached out, or they want to go out for coffee or hang out or something like that. And it's cool to talk shop. It's also cool so when you have certain things that are on your mind, like you could bounce that off of somebody, and it's not just someone who like really supports you, but it's also somebody that understands. So that's kind of my favorite part. And also it's the ability to make whatever I want and potentially earn an income off of it without having to go through different people in order to get that done. Ooh, okay, I like this one. And it is, what is your self-talk when you don't feel like creating? This kind of goes back into the whole mentality side of things, and done is better than perfect is the short answer. But when I was growing up, my parents, being like immigrant parents, their ideas of what a successful job looks like is doctor, lawyer, engineer. I know I used an accent there. But anyways, you were more pushed into the STEM fields of things, and you got a lot of that training when you were young. So for example, I used to do multiplication tables, like for fun. Like when I was a kid, I was not allowed to like do certain things until like I had done math at home. There was a thing that my dad said, which I hated when I was a kid, but I understand as an adult. And he said, you're going to be so good at X, Y, and Z that it feels like second nature, which means the thing that you're doing, you do so often that it just feels like a part that's inherently part of your being. And the self-talk I have in terms of creating is, even if I don't finish an entire video, I can always finish it at some time, but you have to do something today, right? And that's through the repetition of creating videos. I used to have a bunch more videos that I've since deleted. And also when I work as a freelancer with other creators as well, like that it does actually feel just like part of your day. It feels like brushing your teeth. It feels like when I go to No Frills to make sure I have raspberries for my protein shake in the afternoon. Like there are certain things that it becomes inherent to your personality, or just how you do things. So my self-talk when I don't feel like those things is like, A, acknowledging that you do it all the time, so it's okay to take a break, but B, if you have the capacity to do it, and be honest with yourself about it, but if you have the capacity for it, then do something. You don't have to finish the task entirely, but doing something is far better than not doing anything at all. So the next one is gonna be, what are my tips for newbies getting into YouTube? And to be honest with you, I still think contextually I'm a newbie as well. Like 12,000 subscribers is great, but it's definitely not the upper echelon of anything as far as YouTube goes. But if I was to offer any sort of advice, I do have 3 points that you can use that you could actually start using today. The first thing is going to be, talk about stuff that you already know about. Most of the time, people can't really deny your own lived experiences, and everybody is going to have different lived experiences that might resonate with somebody else on this platform. There's literally 2 billion people on it, so there's always something that you can talk about that other people can resonate with. The next thing is going to be focusing on things that you can control. And some of my things in terms of the benchmarks that I have for YouTube isn't necessarily like getting to 100,000 subscribers, but my whole thing is like, well, I can control how many videos I put out. So I could control if I want to put out 120 videos this year, and maybe a result of that is that you get closer to 100,000 subscribers. I could control putting out 300 short form videos or having a regular podcast. Those are things that I can control on my own. I can't control views. I can't control what the YouTube algorithm does or pushing videos out. So having goals around things that you could actually control and not necessarily something that happens that a computer program is choosing for you is something that helps me a lot with like making content on this platform. And thirdly, and some people might disagree with this, but give yourself the ability and the agency to be wrong about stuff. Now that might sound ridiculous because if you're gonna go on YouTube, you have to be some sort of an expert in terms of the topic or we're not gonna respect you nor subscribe to your channel. I don't think that's exactly true because, and I only realized this because there was a video that I made on this channel and it was about trying to fix the top handle issue with the Sony FX6. I didn't do it. I actually sucked at it. I actually failed miserably at doing it. But what it did was, instead of getting flamed by everybody in the comments, albeit some people got mad about it, there was a conversation around a design flaw around a camera that a lot of people had and they just weren't happy with that particular feature of it. And that started an interesting conversation, and honestly, no one really unsubscribed and not that many people got upset about it. So in terms of when you're creating content, like you're allowed to be wrong about stuff. It's just weird when if you blatantly lie about something or you're just not willing to receive the correct information when it's presented. Like generally speaking, those are things that people might give you flack for, but if you have a video and you're not right about something or you're wrong about a detail, and you receive the information and you say like, hey, like I learned something and like I'll correct myself in the next video, that means that there's some sort of growth that's happened. And a lot of people, when they subscribe, they're almost in a way saying they want to grow with you in the channel and the direction that you're going in. So allowing yourself to not be right all the time and not be this expert to sit on an ivory tower and talk down to everybody is a very human experience, and it's a great way to actually make content. But at the same time, just don't go and make videos for the sole purpose of being wrong all the time. But you guys know what I mean. All right, so the last and the final thing is going to be, what are some of my aspirations and do I have a dream client? Now, when I started freelancing, especially when I was like in the fitness industry and stuff, my gym client was Gymshark, which ironically I had worked for 3 times, which is cool. But up until this point, I don't necessarily have a dream client, but there is a certain goal and an aspiration that I have, and that's based on kind of this channel and kind of the personal brand as a whole. In Toronto, it's easy to get into certain production situations, but it's hard to start your own company. And the reason being for that is that you do have to put up a lot of upfront work, and it is a lot of effort. And a lot of times you spend the first little bit not getting paid. And me personally, I feel really weird when I ask somebody to do something and they're not receiving their value equally back into what they're putting in, i.e. they're not getting paid for it. So I have a lot of apprehension and a lot of like self-talk that I don't like to pursue those type of situations. But what I want to do with this YouTube channel is to build a personal brand, or if not, a library of different things that you can come to me from, whether it's a camera tutorial or how to shoot something in a certain way, or a lighting tutorial, to be known for the library of content that you have, because that would be the funneling capital for a production company. So that way, when I do want to start making my own films, or I want to up the scale of the productions that I've already been working on, I could use YouTube money to do that in the support of things like sponsors, or even you guys, or digital courses, or whatever. And I could bridge the gap between kind of begging people for a favor and then actually getting certain things done. So that's one of the overarching aspirations for me in terms of what I want next for myself and this channel. Now, that kind of goes into a couple of different things that you guys might love, or some of you guys might actually not like at all. First thing is going to be sponsorships. Now, in order for the vast majority of people on YouTube to uphold this channel, uphold literally this part of a business realistically, they got to take on sponsors. And I'm not going to be necessarily opposed to taking on a sponsored video. The only thing I can commit to is that I won't take on something that I don't think that somebody can value from or learn from. So if you see me reviewing like a self-cleaning vacuum for your home, just know that's a little bit disingenuous. However, there are certain products that I think from even a high budget or a low budget standpoint that some filmmaker or some videographer can find useful, and I want to highlight those things on this channel, accompanied with doing things like tutorials and lighting breakdowns and editing breakdowns, which might actually come a little bit later. Next thing is going to be in-person workshops and mini courses. So my challenge this year is to start to establish a little bit more authority in the education side of things. I'm still gonna have gear videos because that stuff is interesting, but I want to create more tutorials tutorials that'll culminate into actually making a course about fitness cinematography, which is something that I do quite a lot of. So by the end of this year, that's my challenge, by December 2023, I wanna roll out my first mini course in terms of how you guys can navigate yourselves through that, especially if you're a solo operator or you're working with a small team. On the flip side of that, I also want to try doing a couple in-person workshops and courses as well, mostly because like I live in a gigantic city. Toronto's huge. And also it's a great way to meet some of you guys in real life. So we all can be in the same room together because we're allowed to now. So that's awesome. Thirdly is going to be podcasting. Now, YouTube added a podcast platform to their overall website, which I'm actually super interested in because as you guys can see, I could talk for a really friggin' long time. In fact, all of this video is essentially one take. But I want to be able to have a podcast and have different conversations with different groups of people around this niche, have some of those things that we don't really talk about unless it's in the dark corners of a coffee shop or somewhere else, or fighting on Twitter. I don't know, whatever it is. I want to start podcasting, and that's something that I'm going to do. But all that being said, I want to thank you guys so much for literally doubling the subscriber count since January the 1st, which is nuts to me that like on January 1st, there was 6,000 subs, and I'm like, I want to hit 10K for like my birthday in April. And in the last like 3 weeks, it went up by like 4,000, which is insane for me to think about, but I only have you guys to thank, and I'm only gonna put out more content to help make that go up even higher. So if you guys do like this video, I know it wasn't the most flashy thing in the world, but it was a couple of things that you can use for your channel, and also you get to hear my voice for about a half an hour. That being said, I hope to see you guys in the next one. Watch another video on this channel. That'd be great. See ya.